Finally, finally, I have returned with some new content. And I've had a whole lot of changes in my life over the past year since I made a video. So if you guys want an update, I'll put an update at the end of this video. But I do want to throw something out there right away. I am inspired to make this video in part because one, I realized how little content I made, and that's in relation to the fact that Tay Zunday, the chocolate rain guy, he commented on my videos. I think he even subscribed to me. So the legendary chocolate rain guy basically subscribed to my content. So Tay Zunday, if you're watching this, I heavily appreciate you leaving your commentary, hitting me up, and I'll leave my email down in the description. I tried to reach you through Facebook, but it seems like a brand account. Either way, I definitely want to hear from you and your experience in dealing with dyspraxia. So hit me up. And without any further ado, I guess it's time for me to do what I usually do and talk about my experience with dyspraxia. So in this video, I want to discuss hobbies with dyspraxia. So originally, I was going to make this a series in which I talk about different hobbies and how dyspraxia relates to them. And it seems like it's just easier to generalize the hobbies as one thing, especially because the key thing that ties them all together is the fact that dyspraxia affects our fine motor and gross motor control. So therefore, both the functioning of digits and dexterity as well as big muscle control. Because of this, we're kind of discouraged from doing more common hobbies like sports or even certain things like carpentry and making things. And I don't know many dyspraxics that are very good with cars. Now, if most dyspraxics are like me and don't drive anyway, it's not like that's a major disadvantage, but still, it's something that leads us to going to different avenues when it comes to hobbies that we take part in. Now, part of the reason for me starting this video outside, well, actually, there's two main reasons. For one, the lighting is better here than it is downstairs where I live, and I'd like to start off with a good first impression. The other is because I brought out this fella right here. This is Riley, all right, and he is a German Shepherd. Now, when it comes to keeping pets, I would not recommend pets to most dyspraxics. Riley is mainly my mom's dog, and I will take care of him if my mom passes before he does. But dogs are hard, especially bigger dogs like German Shepherds and so on. You're going to have to take them on walks, and especially if they're a heavier dog like that, the walking is going to be difficult. You also have to worry about potty training and all that other stuff. So, dogs are kind of difficult. You also have to kind of maintain a regular schedule. You have to feed them like you feed another person. It's like having another child. And while many people don't consider them as labor intensive as having another child, the actual amount of care that you should properly give to your animals should be equivalent to a child. Vet bills are just as expensive. They do need to be groomed regularly. And, with dyspraxia, some find it hard for us to groom ourselves. And I still have a video in the pipeline about that. But grooming your dog, or even your cat, believe it or not, cats do require serious grooming as well. So grooming is really hard, and if you opt out of doing it, it's expensive. So don't get a dog or a cat unless you can really afford all the extra expenses, as well as anything you wouldn't be able to do with a dog or a cat. If you do get a dog, I would heavily recommend something smaller that doesn't require a lot of grooming. Still, you want to try to maintain some kind of schedule, which, as you know, is pretty hard to do when you have dyspraxia. So something like a terrier of some kind, a smaller dog that would be easy to walk. Because when this guy pulls, I can tell you, even if I did have the strength I used to when I came out of the army, I still would have trouble with my gross motor skills, maintaining him and everything. So Instead, I would heavily recommend two specific exotic animals. Longtime viewers of the channel will not be surprised when I say this, but the first hobby as well as pet that I recommend for most dyspraxics would be spider keeping. And I specifically say spider keeping for a reason. Now, as many of you may or may not know, I have recently developed into the tarantula hobby, and tarantulas are incredible. They're pretty cool. They come in so many different varieties, and they're surprisingly really easy to care for. Now, on a scale between like goldfish and reptiles, are definitely closer to the goldfish end. However, this is where I would recommend something like true spiders, things like widows, or even common house spiders or jumping spiders, which have seen a huge surge in popularity lately. And the thing is, with true spiders, they don't live as long, but they stay small and they're really, really easy to care for. They don't usually have a lot of humidity requirements. You don't have to worry about rehousing and all that other stuff. Where with tarantulas, there's definitely a little bit more hands on care. And I definitely do want to do a more in depth video one of these days talking about caring for tarantulas in general with dyspraxia, as it is just as rewarding, although it does have a layer of difficulty to it that's more akin to keeping an exotic reptile. You do have to worry about humidity, and especially if your fine motor is effective, things like rehouses and actual unboxings can be quite difficult. So I'll do a more in-depth video on that later on. But the next recommendation is hiding here, but the next recommendation I have would be American toads. When it comes to relatively easy to keep pets, you can't do any better than the American toad. Now, granted, most amphibians are really hard to keep for the average person because many of them have regular humidity requirements that you have to keep up with. They also require regular misting, they need to be fed almost every day, you have to deal with all this other stuff. However, American toads are actually ridiculously hardy, and they're surprisingly easy to get a hold of. Tarantulas as well are pretty easy to get your hands on. However, true spiders you can find pretty much anywhere. But with American toads, they're super hardy. You almost have to try to kill American toads. All you really need is a sizable enclosure, depending on the size of the toad you're getting, as well as a water dish and then somewhere for it to hide. And they're basically set. Super easy to care for. You do have to feed them every day, usually mealworms and crickets and all that stuff. But compared to almost all the pets out there, even my personal favorite with spiders, I would heavily recommend American toads to any dyspraxic looking to get any hobby, and even a dyspraxic looking to get into something like a reptile or tarantula hobby for the long term, because these are rewarding hobbies that don't really have the same ceiling level as most hobbies. Um, a toad is probably the best place to start. If you can keep a toad, you can ease yourself into keeping other things like mourning geckos, crested geckos, and so on, and eventually get into the reptile hobby. So that's one of the bigger hobbies I heavily recommend. A hobby that I would surprisingly recommend for most dyspraxics would be musical instruments, mainly guitars, bass guitars, and stringed instruments, as they work on kind of the same fine motor skills that hamper us from a lot of things. However, with things like music, like instruments and so on, a lot of the enjoyment comes from the subjectivity of the music. It is an art. It's an audio art, but it's still an art nonetheless. So it's really hard to do, music wrong per se, and especially if you're only doing it as a hobby. Now, if you are looking to get more in depth into things like guitar, bass guitar, and so on, I did a much more in depth video on playing guitar with dyspraxia that I'll link up here somewhere. However, I would still, even if it's not something you're all that into, I would still recommend trying an instrument out, even if it's something like singing, or even if you grab a didgeridoo or a penny whistle or something. Like, the instrumentation is really fun and rewarding to get into. If your gross motor is affected a lot more than your fine motor, you'll find it a little easier to get into as opposed to most sports and stuff. So, would definitely recommend it. Now, I've also found that most dyspraxics tend to be more inclined towards music too. I don't know why. I've always had an affinity for musical instruments. I would just pick one up, and then after like a month, I would be able to play it proficiently. And that's not being egotistical. That's something I see in a lot of dyspraxics. Let me know if you guys can relate. All right, now to address the elephant in the room here. And this is the reason why talking about the previous hobbies only took 2 minutes. And you may notice that this video still has some sizable length on it. I do not claim to be a sizable YouTuber, not in the slightest. And as I've said in many of my videos, I never made these videos with the intent on getting views. And I've mainly hovered around 250 views the past like couple years now. So I have a sizable amount of views and I definitely have an audience. However, I don't do this for monetization. I don't see monetization in the future. So I think it's safe to say that this is a YouTube channel specifically as a hobby. The past couple of years have seen some of the craziest jobs arise, as with things like influencers on Instagram, TikTok, and especially YouTube gaining significant amounts of money to the point that there are many people who make their careers on YouTube, including some fellow dyspraxics. Notably, I mentioned Tay Zunde earlier, but also Crystal Bella Shaw. And another one that I've been following off and on lately is Visual Knowledge, who I would heavily recommend you guys check out. And I think he's even commented on some of my stuff. But I've noticed a pattern with them that I also notice with myself. And that's me as a hobbyist, not even as a career YouTuber. Being in front of people is something that I've always found somewhat unpleasant, despite the fact that before COVID, I was doing shows semi-regularly as a musician. You guys saw I uploaded that one show I did in, I believe it was like 2020. And before that, I'd say a few years before that, I used to go and play at this local venue like regularly, at least once a month. And I've always kind of had this inherent stage fright, despite the fact that I'm actually pretty good at talking to crowds. I don't know why I've always related to crowds very well. And so when it comes to public speaking as a hobby, it's something I've always kind of gravitated around. But as soon as I would start to gain some traction, I would kind of drop off. Because the more people that followed me, it would almost enhance the anxiety that I would deal with on a regular basis. There's just something about people following you that is somewhat angst-inducing. And any major YouTubers, please weigh in. And I think a lot of it is less about anxiety or even stage fright and more about trying to meet certain demands. Like the past year or so that I haven't made much content. And I've discussed how my mushroom trip creating more anxiety probably didn't help. But I find that when I start to gain some traction, I start to feel some expectations on me. Because most typical YouTubers, especially the paid ones, put out a regular weekly content. And it's something that I don't feel I can meet because I will have months at a time where I just won't have the motivation to make a YouTube video or do much of anything. And that's tied to depression to some degree. That's tied to the pressure of YouTube and trying to maintain an audience. But also that's kind of tied to dyspraxia as well. We require a lot of thought, and I've discussed this in many of my videos, but it requires a lot of thought to do even simple tasks. So to put together a video, which includes recording, editing, and so on, it requires a lot of work, and it's draining to even most non-neurodivergent YouTubers. Like, I remember Vsauce3, back when he was a thing, started to just get burnt out, and he was making videos on, like, every other couple of months. He wasn't even a weekly YouTuber. And it's something you see all the time with burnout. And something I want to discuss in a later video is burning out from work. Not just YouTube, but just regular work. I find myself getting burnt out more and more often, and I feel like COVID kind of exacerbated that. Where I'm sure you guys noticed in my earlier videos when I was making content regularly, I may go a week or two without uploading, but then I would start uploading again. I swear COVID has made people who are already anxious even more anxious. And throw in the whole YouTube sphere, and even though I don't do it to make, you know, money or a regular audience, there's still some feel of subjective pressure that added on to dyspraxia makes it difficult. Now, that's not to say I don't recommend most YouTubers or most dyspraxics not get into YouTube. It's worked very well for Crystal Bella Shaw, who is a legend amongst dyspraxic YouTubers in my mind. She has a Patreon and everything, and she was my biggest inspiration for starting this channel, and I really hope she sees this video. But I feel like you have to pace yourself and make your own schedule, and I think that also adds to it is the fact that we're making our own schedule. And the pattern I've noticed is with other dyspraxic YouTubers, especially Crystal Bella Shaw and Visual Knowledge, they'll also go large swaths of time without uploading a video. Now, I know they have Patreons, and they do have Patreon exclusive content. However, I don't follow it. I don't know if they are still putting some kind of regular content out there. But this is also why, especially while my audience is relatively small, I do like to plug my Facebook, Orange Mix on Facebook. That way you guys can follow me there, because any kind of artsy stuff I make, I can upload there for anyone who really wants to follow my content. Part of my drive to make this is around the first few times I made these videos, I had a lot of people say that my videos have helped them and have inspired them. And I've had parents who message me and say, oh, my kid watches your videos and they find them really inspiring and they really help them. And that's something I want to do, and that's what's kept me going on. It's just that YouTube as a whole and as a hobby can be somewhat stressful even when you're not doing it for money. So when it comes to dyspraxic hobbies, I wouldn't heavily suggest YouTube. Now, when it comes to gaming content, I've actually been experimenting with a gaming channel, and you can look it up, Oren Milne Gaming. I did one episode of Vintage Story. I tried Skyrim, but my computer just can't run it. But I do find that making a gaming YouTube channel does seem a little easier. So I would heavily recommend someone who's looking to get into YouTube try something like gaming first. Because even vlogs, especially when you're required to do a regular, like monthly or even weekly vlog, it can get kind of draining. And especially nowadays, with how angsty everyone is since COVID, it's just not easy. But that should segue into actual gaming, which gaming is a hobby, so let's discuss it. Alright, so to discuss gaming with dyspraxia, I think what I'll do is I'll open up my Steam library and give you guys kind of an idea of the kind of games I play. And that'll kind of explain. I have a pretty decent sized library, and this is just on Steam. I also have a sizable amount of games on GOG as well as Amazon Gaming. But, you guys may notice that I play kind of the same kind of games, where they're more RPGs or sandbox style games or even sandbox RPGs. A couple of city builders here, I think open world, stuff like that. And that doesn't necessarily mean I play easier games. Like the Outer Worlds, I definitely wouldn't consider all that easy. It is kind of easy, but I feel like when it comes to things that are more common with gamers, like shooters and sports games and especially racing games and stuff, I just don't have the reaction time to really respond to a lot of these things. Skyrim is kind of an exception, and even then I still find myself having trouble in certain parts of Skyrim as well, due to reaction times and stuff. A lot of these aren't first-person games, again, Skyrim being kind of an exception. I think Skyrim is probably one of the most easy to get into first person games as long as you turn view bobbing off. Same with Minecraft. I would heavily recommend Minecraft, and I do want to do a video in the future of Minecraft with Dyspraxia. Once I get some hardware that I can run both OBS and Minecraft on. But you may notice like almost all the games in my library are really these sandbox adventure RPGs, and there's a reason for that. Like I said, with the way our fine motor and gross motor is effective, certain things that require timing and reflexes are kind of difficult. So things like tactical RPGs like Phantom Doctrine, Phoenix Point, XCOM are better because they're turn-based. They don't require having to meet certain timing requirements and all this other stuff. I just got a reward for something. I don't know what. Also, I mean, sandbox games are more open-ended. And on top of that, sandbox games also allow you to kind of explore other methods of playing games. I always found it kind of annoying to play games that don't have an open-ended feel to them and don't have some level of customization, because I really need to have some level of choice in my games, if that makes sense. And it's not me being picky per se, it's more just kind of, it's easier when you have dyspraxia to find alternate ways of doing things. It's almost more rewarding when you find an alternate way to play a game than it would be if you're kind of railroaded into it. City builders are probably one of the best with that. And I wouldn't be surprised if most speedrunners are actually dyspraxic, believe it or not. Just because they, part of the skill that comes with speedrunning is finding alternate methods of doing things. And that's one of our biggest strengths as dyspraxics. So, as you guys can see, I mean, these are the kind of games I play. When it comes to first-person games, as you guys saw, I do play a few. However, the thing about first-person games you want to keep in mind is you would want to turn something like view bobbing off. And you might not even want to play a first-person game to begin with, just because first-person games do require a lot of like motion, especially with the view bobbing and stuff. And for those of us who are easily prone to motion sickness, especially me, that's why I could never get into VR either. I found that even playing Minecraft, after about an hour or two, I would get really like motion sick. I would get headaches and a little nauseous after a few hours of playing. So yeah. So yeah, those are pretty much all the hobbies that I do personally. Minus putting stickers on everything, which I just got a whole bunch of, and that'll be fun. Maybe I'll do another video of a sticker project or something. But that's really the more common hobbies I have. Something I find myself doing, however, is just getting into random small hobbies here and there, for little bursts at a time. Like I was gonna mention chess in this video, but I honestly haven't played chess in a significant amount of time. Um, there's a couple of other things, like how I got into wrestling for a short period of time, and then went to train to wrestle, and that hurt like hell. But I did that for a little bit. I feel like I usually have a few consistent hobbies, but then other hobbies I'll just do for a short period of time and then just be done with. And I feel like that's a dyspraxic kind of trying a hobby. As I've discussed in previous videos, most of the time it takes us a minute to even realize whether or not we're kind of good at something, or something is good for us, or something that we can do and enjoy fully. And so it takes us a while of doing this thing and getting really into it, and even just perfecting it, and not perfecting it per se, but getting into it enough to say that we were actually proficient at doing it. And then after I hit that level, at least I'm usually done. You know what I mean? So Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know how much sense that makes, but that's kind of how I do things, whether it be chess, wrestling, or whatever. Usually I'll do it, I'll get into it, I'll get really into it, and I'll like get so into it, like not obsessed, but I'll get so into it that I want to do it until I am good at it. And then once I am relatively proficient at it, I usually kind of just drop it. Or I get bored of it and then I'm done with it. Or I get to a point where I just realize that I can't, or there's no way I'll ever master it to even a proficient level, and then I'll drop it. And that's how it is with chess, and that's how it's been with almost all instruments, minus guitars. Believe it or not, I have a few just random instruments laying around that I haven't touched in a while. As for that final update I was talking about, um, I do plan on making YouTube videos again, and I feel like with this channel, I kind of got to upload in little bursts. Now, a significant reason why I haven't been making as much content as usual is the cord I was using to take the videos from my phone and put them onto my laptop broke. So on top of all the extra effort that it would have taken, I had to get something called like AirDrop and then try to do it that way and get it onto my computer, and then that ended up taking up too much space on my phone, and it costed money, which I just didn't have at the moment. So I recently got something that's supposed to be like a phone to USB adapter kind of thing. So I'm going to try that out, and that's kind of where this video is from. It's kind of an experimental thing to some degree. But I did kind of want to touch on what I've been going through throughout this video, too. Like I said, I mentioned my gaming channel. I talked a bit of how YouTube is draining sometimes. And that's the thing. I mean, if YouTube can be draining for someone small who's not doing it for the money, I can imagine, I can't even imagine how some of the bigger YouTubers feel when they got to kind of meet these demands. Even some gaming YouTubers, I've even heard like they need to take like little breaks here and there. So, you know, um, that's basically it for this video. I appreciate you guys for watching and following me. I'm 250 subscribers strong, and I really appreciate it. I honestly do. I know I spent a good like 5-10 minutes there just going on about how draining YouTube can be, but honestly, the support really means a lot. It really does. And you guys are awesome. All your comments are awesome. The fact that I'm getting bigger YouTubers now that are like commenting on my videos and stuff, that's awesome. It really means a lot, and it's inspiring. And it really motivates me to make more videos and stuff, believe it or not. So I heavily appreciate it, you guys. Um, I am thinking of trying to do gaming more consistently on that gaming channel. I can't promise anything, but I am looking into trying to find some games that I can do kind of long plays on that won't tax my computer. It has 16 gigabytes of RAM. It's like a refurbished Lenovo ThinkPad. And yeah, typically a Lenovo ThinkPad can't do that, but it's refurbished. So it's got like 16 gigabytes of RAM, like a specific like graphics card and stuff. Like I got it like super refurbished and everything. So it's something that I can actually run Skyrim on, unlike most of my low end PCs I've had in the past. So that's the thing is, I want to try to find something that I can run OBS and the game with that won't have like significant lag. I didn't seem to have too many issues with Vintage Story, but there's still some lag and some issues with it. So let me know what games you think I should do on that gaming channel, and I'll definitely try to do regular content for that on my days off. And that way you guys have something, some kind of content you can see me do on a regular basis that I could do weekly pretty much easily. Like firing up OBS isn't that hard. But yeah, that's all for this one, everyone. Thanks for watching, and you guys have a good one.